Jacob, man, you're in Germany,
I am.
I
I'm in
mean,
your future.
and you're in the future. Well, right there, right there is an anomaly that we got to deal with. I mean, so there is such a thing as being in the future, and you're in it.
Absolutely.
So how is life in the future? I mean, is the world still here, or did they blow it up yet?
It's still here. I think it's still here. I haven't looked outside because it's pitch black, but I believe it's still here. It's
Okay.
quiet.
All right. Well, hey, I appreciate you staying up so late there to be on the program, and we really want to talk to you a lot of things, and particularly, I mean, being an adventure visionary and filmmaker, the like the film and the ones I'm kind of interested in really is the Klaus Dona one in particular about the out of place objects. Of course, you've got Solar Revolution, Packing from Mars, and Stranger at the Pentagon, and those really some exciting top titles there. And I've got a link to your website on our show so people can look at that after the show. And by the way, people that are watching, if you have a question for Frank, just put it in either a live chat on the website or the live chat on our YouTube streaming channel. Both of them get sent here by our moderator. Well, Frank, out of place object, if you start there. But first of all, let's kind of introduce yourself to the audience. How does one become a adventurer, visionary, and filmmaker all in one?
Well, it didn't happen overnight. It just sort of, it trended in that direction. From the very start, I've always been kind of a very, I think at a very early age, I woke up and saw the world around me as being somewhat crazy. I read some books that scared me a lot, like Hiroshima. And, when you're young and you read about these like mass murdering events, you realize, oh my God, the governments out there are insane. And so I became very skeptical at a very early age. And I read some books that kind of opened my mind to just map out the universe. And ever since then, I've been interested in avant-garde topics. And I leaned toward the arts. So I ventured into music and filmmaking and visuals and realized the best way to get messages across is to transcend the filters, and that works really well with music and images.
Hmm. And
And it took a few years, but gradually I ended up in over here in Europe, and I knew that one day I wanted to start making like films, cool cinematic films, and especially the idea of making films that are about sort of these off the fringe kind of topics interested me, because a lot of those were at that time everything I'd seen wasn't really a very good quality. A lot of the stuff on YouTube was very bad quality. So I thought, I have the skill set and I have the equipment, and I wanted to just sort of approach that in a very cinematic way.
mhm.
And that sort of gave birth to Packing for Mars, Solar Revolution. Klaus Dona came in the middle there somewhere because he was somebody that we were introduced to, and he wasn't very far away. I think it was Alfred Weber who said, well, you're in Austria. At the time I was living in Austria. So he said, you're in Austria. There's this guy out there called Klaus Dona. You should see him. So I called him up and I visited him, and we've been friends ever since. And we started to, and I realized at that time he didn't have anything out there, no books, no DVDs. So we kind of put together all of his things and like visuals and some films and odds and ends and pictures, and we made kind of like a little, well, what you see as the Klaus Dona Chronicles.
Mhm. Um, in your life travels, have you come across any shockingly wrong views that have been, because you talk about filters, and this show's been banned a couple times already. I mean, most people's shows that say anything about anything is going to get banned for some amount of time, whatnot, or permanent. But so we've got filters all over the place. But has anything ever that shocked you, that you always believed and the system told you particularly, and you went along with it as a normal person? Yeah, that sounds right. But then you find out, wait a minute, that's completely wrong. Have you ever had any one of those things happen to you?
Uh, well, I mean, if you look at Klaus Dona, then yeah, there's an example of he had an exhibit here in Austria in 2001 with 400 real artifacts that shouldn't exist if history, as we've been taught in the history books, is true. So holding those things, and we had some artifacts in our hand from Huelos de Alisca, this area of Mexico, uh, where it just, was clear that these were not just fantasy depictions of extraterrestrials,
Hmm.
but they were really, seriously, I mean, these were extraterrestrials, it was clear.
Hmm.
And the other thing, I guess, is that, having come over to Europe, and particularly in Germany, I began to run into people that had information about historical perspectives that were totally different from what I'd been taught in school as well. And that kind of sent me off on a bit of a research journey for the last
Hmm.
few years as well. So I realized that a lot of what's written in the history books is not only just, the version of the victors,
Hmm.
but it's actually been deliberately altered to be false.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Right.
so you realize, oh my God, like there really are people out there in the system that would like to create a version of reality that isn't true, but it works in their favor.
Hmm.
Yeah, so those are some of the things that I guess just sort of convinced me to, when if I'm going to make films and I'm going to present information out there publicly, then I want to push back a little bit on that, because I
Yeah.
think we need to, because the topic that's been come up in the last month is just the idea of timelines and how does that work? And timelines have a
Hmm.
lot to do with our day-to-day decisions and our belief system, what we
Hmm.
think is real.
Hmm.
And most of us, most of what we think and believe has been tainted by those around us that we're born into this world, and we're kind of victims of the society that we land in, because we don't you know we
Right.
don't really have the chance to alter it, so we
Hmm.
accept it because we trust our parents, and by extension then we trust our fellow humans, and then into the government. We don't expect the government would lie to us or manipulate the truth like that, but they do.
Hmm. Somebody in live's chat said you look like a rock star. So hey man, can I have your autograph?
Yeah,
So hey,
absolutely.
I got a topic. Maybe you already touched on this because I know we're looking at the Klaus Dona. Oh, we already looked at the Klaus Dona background there. There's a pyramid there, of course, but in the Grand Canyon, there are all kinds of areas that are named after Egyptian kings and priests. And a lot of those areas are blocked off and you can't get access to them. You certainly can't fly over them. And the word kind of is that our uh, government went there and found out of place objects, including details of Egyptian presence, and mummies, and various things, and they took them off to D.C. and hid them away. Are you familiar with that?
Yes, I've heard that as well. Yeah, there's definitely evidence of their presence in America, which certainly, opens up also in Australia. So it opens up your, again, historical perspective, to new horizons. Like, what were they
Hmm.
doing there?
Hmm.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
just shows us that either they had technology which enabled them to, you know, fly there or transport over the oceans, or they teleported even maybe. And we've
Yeah.
now realized that there's stargates all over the planet, and these things can function like a kind of teleportation
Hmm.
device as well. So
Now,
maybe the Egyptians already had that technology,
I'm,
maybe, or maybe they had technology to enable them to fly, or anti-gravity, whatever. It's just there's a
mhm.
lot of aspects of that historical chapter which have gone missing because it's been so long.
So I would take it you're not of the belief that a few thousand guys with sandals and ropes built the pyramids.
No, I'm not.
You're not quite there yet. Okay, well we're going to work on you
No.
try to convince you. By the way, I don't know if you've seen the website, but we have a poll question related to tonight's topic, as we always do. This one here is out of place objects, where they come from, and the choices are past civilizations, a parallel universe, time travels, hoaxers, aliens. Somebody said, "Well, I never heard of them." So let's see what the results are. All right, 90% of the respondents say that the out of place objects came from past civilizations, and 9% actually say from time travelers. You kind of sort of touched on that a little bit. Now we got, I think one of the CERN colliders, they reactivated after being 4 years of not running, and who knows what the hell they're doing with that. And how's that, Frank? How do they build a 17-mile structure. Who's paying for that underneath in a big circle? And they fire some little proton around in there. How do they know that little thing hits the target? I mean, that thing. And you talk about stargates. I'm thinking they're trying to open up something there, and it has nothing to do with atom smashing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they've reopened it after 2 years, and they've refurbished it so that they have these. Yeah. I mean, it is up to us to kind of believe what we're being told because we can't really imagine particles that are subatomic in size being hurled around a 27-kilometer magnetic loop at pretty much the speed of light and then smashed together.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds all very nebulous to any normal person. The only way I can verify what's going on there is because of some of the people that I know over here in Germany are scientists, and I have people in my network that are scientists, and they knew somebody who actually worked at CERN in the very early days. His name was Hans-Peter Wirtz, and he had a very interesting story to tell, and that was that essentially they realized that they had built kind of a time machine. And scientists, there's even articles about it going back, quite a few years actually already, 8 years, 9 years, where they had pretty much figured out how to create these time loops. But they never, and they were trying to create like black holes to, duplicate sort of the Big Bang, and they never really had enough power. And but they did sort of figure out how to bend or alter time. And there's some very interesting anomalous activity that took place within that 27-kilometer loop, like pictures where you could almost see two versions of Earth overlapping in the same picture, clocks running at a different speed. But what they weren't satisfied with the power that they had there, and they put another 2.5 billion euros. And yes, you're right. Where does this money come from? Seem to have enough money for the people,
Right.
for the problems that they're throwing at us constantly in the news. But they have enough money for these devices, and they've essentially what they did with this. For 2 years they were shut down, and they've added functionality to the point where they can now they operate in tera electron volts, which are 1 tera electron volt is 1 trillion electron volts. So they now, before they shut down, they were working in the 5 to 6 tera electron volt range. And now they've set it up so that they're actually capable, at least officially, they announced that they're up to 12 tera electron volts. So they've pretty much doubled their capacity. Mm-hmm. Somebody sent me a chat that said, no, actually they're up to 40, but I can't verify that. But let's just say they have 12. I mean, in the history of our civilization, at least our version of humanity, there's never been so much energy, electricity concentrated on one particular tiny little speck of the Earth as there is in CERN right now.
Wow.
And so what they're doing is they're really opening up a black hole into a parallel universe. And we and Hans-Peter Wirtz, he was somebody who was involved before they ramped it up to the new version, and when they sort of realized that they had a time machine at their hands, and the experiments that they were doing or opened up these other dimensions. It's the classic story, like the MIBs showed up, Men in Black walked in and began locking off certain areas of the facility and took it over. And our friend Hans-Peter Wirtz was kind of pushed out and got his security clearance changed. And he realized that they started to work on altering human consciousness with what they were doing over there. And he came out in 2019 at a conference with one of my friends, Dieter Brers, and he made that announcement publicly. And it was funny because on his way to that particular conference, they tried to run him off the road twice. And unfortunately, 2 weeks after he went public, he was found dead. So they're very serious about keeping what's going on there, obviously, under wraps. Mm-hmm. And nobody really can access. I mean, a lot of the scientists that are working there don't even really understand what's really going on at that facility.
Yeah.
They've got sub-facilities. They've got smaller colliders, and other areas.
Right.
So there's a lot of work going on there, which is not really understood by a lot of the scientists that are there. but you can be sure that by opening up this black hole, that they are on the one hand pushing into other dimensions. In other words, maybe some of them are looking to get into another dimension. And yet at the same time, whenever you open a black hole, we know that things come through to our side as well. It's like a drain. When you pull the plug, it only works. Water will only go down if air comes up through the drain.
Hmm.
So we're bringing things into our dimension as well from wherever they're boring through to. And Geordie Rose talked about how they were using quantum computers already 10, actually 12 years ago now, to solve problems between parallel universes. And so what's going on over there is definitely covering all these grounds. They're probing through into other dimensions. They're maybe even co-collaborating with parallel universes. And they're not telling us exactly what they're doing, but I guess you could say if if they're breaking through and changing time, it's kind of dangerous territory that they're venturing into.
Well, yeah, who the hell knows what's going to come through there? Kind of reminded me of this. I don't know. I guess it was a movie, The Skinwalker Ranch, where they said that there were eyewitnesses there that a portal opened up right in front of them, and they saw creatures come out of this hole. So it seems that there are natural I call them thin places. That might be a good term for it, or places where there are portals. I think the ancients knew where they were. And I think what we're talking about with the CERN Collider is that they're trying to bring that to another level. Like rather than having some mystical doorway somewhere, they're trying to fabricate a good door that they can open and shut when they want. And I got a feeling that if somebody wants to come through there, that this side ain't going to have the intelligence or the strength or power. And I don't know how many bits of power that you were talking about there, but I don't think we got enough to stop them if they want to come through.
12 trillion electron volts.
So Frank, do you think that this is part of what people call the Mandela effect?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the Mandela effect began appearing at around the time that they started cracking through, or at least that they started making claims about cracking through to these other dimensions. Now, there was another Hadron Collider experiment that we found out about from, what was happening in South America in the 90s. And it was called the Chani experiment. It was a computer-enhanced interface system that they had set up then already. And they were they had actually found a way to, with the assistance of computers, set up this communication to another parallel Earth. And they had for years, this is really bizarre, they had communication with a person on the other side speaking to our version of Earth, and they were exchanging, I think, like about 20,000 questions back and forth that were exchanged. And at the year 2000, their computers at that time lost the communication, and they tried to reestablish that communication, and it happened again in 2007. So already back then, they were really bleeding through and setting up that gateway, as you might call it, just so that things like would seep through from both sides. And now the fact is that we already live in multiple parallel dimensions all the time, as quantum physics is determining now.
Do you think
we cross over into these dimensions very subtly? And it's interesting because the Looking Glass experiment talks about how timelines are converging toward a certain point in time. So it seems like there's a funnel effect happening as well. I would say that we definitely are moving into areas where we are crossing over dimensions. Now, whether it's natural or artificial is the question. What is natural and artificial anymore? If you realize that humanity would someday develop technology to be able to do these things, that's a kind of a natural process too, because it's just the brain, getting curious and trying things out and manipulating its environment. So in that sense, even things that are unnatural are part of a natural evolutionary flow.
When it comes to Mandela effect, is there any one particular one that you're aware of that you go, that's not right? Kind of putting you on the spot there,
the guitar player from The Who, that's one for me. Pete Townshend, right? That's his name, and I always knew that his name was spelled like town, Town,
Right.
and then in England, it's just Send. You don't when you say Shend, you don't add an H. It's just you pronounce it like Townshend,
Hmm.
But now, if I look into my records, even and on the internet and stuff, Townshend is spelled with an H, Shend, and I'm like, no, that's definitely not
I
right.
don't know
I mean,
now.
that's there. I knew very for a fact that Pete, because I remember the first time I found out about his name, because people would say it's Pete Townshend, and when I saw his name on the album, I said, well, that's weird. Why don't they say Pete Townsend? And that stuck out in my brain. I still remember that very clearly. So that's my own personal version of the Mandela effect. You have
Yeah,
one too?
yeah. It's Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. Look, I grew up with that. With the guy at the tennis shoe, and he always say, "It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood," and now it says, "It's a wonderful day in this neighborhood." He never said that ever. I don't care who tells me. They talk about mass hysteria. That's always the system collapsing on people arising out of the matrix goo. If you start to come out of the matrix goo, the system will
Yeah.
collapse upon you, make you feel you're isolated, you're a psycho, you're disinformation, and that you need to shut up. You need to be dealt with severely. All right. Well, we've got numbers of questions coming in, Frank. So let's take a few of those real quick. And by the way, jumping into the live chat that came in the live chat after I introduced the other people in the live chat: Robert Griffin, Freely Speaking, Tammy Hall, Life Station Express, Chill Girl, Teflon Coat, Overbuilt Automotive, and Louise and Scotty all joining us in the live chat. All right, here's a question from Rose. Says Frank, who are these guardians of the Looking Glass?
Okay. Uh, well, the Guardians of the Looking Glass are a group of they appeared in March this year, on March 11th to be exact, on their own YouTube channel, and they just showed up and claimed to be military insiders and Secret Service people who had worked on a project called The Looking Glass back in the 80s and 90s. And they resurfaced because they were a particular group of members within that organization who felt that the project had been taken over and steered by negative factions, people that wanted to manipulate timelines in their favor instead of the favor of the mass of people, us. If we backstep a little bit about the Looking Glass is what it kind of sounds like. It's not a glass, but they called it the Looking Glass because it's a device, a technological device that enabled those who operated the device to peer into future timelines. And they once they had this technology, of course, they at some point started to figure out, hey, if we know we can look into the future, let's see if we change some event in the present, let's see what the outcome will be. And because they had they documented all of the different timelines that they've been observing, they were able to see, if X, then Y kind of thing. And these particular group of calling themselves the Guardians of the Looking Glass, essentially were not comfortable with the idea that this one rogue faction were manipulating the timelines to the point where it was going to lead to a very dark future. And there were many people that were involved in, top secret clearance, and they were able to get a set of the data, and essentially the project went shut off for a while, and it appears to have resurfaced because there's a couple of versions of the Looking Glass history we could get into a little bit about, um, prior to the Guardians resurfacing. But long story short is, I think like 10 years after this project kind of went silent, they reappeared with these incredible video messages describing future events that were going to happen, and they had taken it upon themselves to kind of open source those events because they could see the only possibility for us to recapture the timeline and create a timeline that works in our favor was for them to do that on very specific dates. And so they started to do that, and in the meantime, they've released two additional videos. When I found their YouTube channel, they had they had two videos. They had one explanatory video, and they had one called Event One, which describing an event that was going to be happening in New York City on the 18th of April. So the only way that they could affect the timeline that they saw was to, like I said, open source the information, and people would talk about it. And if many, many people began talking about the events possibly happening, then it would be a deterrent for those who were trying to make those events happen to go through with them, because then it would obviously be, it would spoil the surprise. And a lot of the surprise had to do with the fact that these are false flag operations, and false flag operations don't work if everyone knows that you're planning this event. And so I broke this story, and it got picked up on the Inspired channel, and within days we had hundreds of thousands of people watching the interview and talking about these timelines and these guardians and the looking glass. So it's safe to say, and that's apparently what happened, is we actually diverted the event from happening on the 18th. It did not take place.
Well,
that's sort of a quick nutshell.
Frank, I appreciate you. Appreciate you, because it doesn't sound like it'd be good, whatever the hell it was. All right. Freely Speaking says, Frank, who is the stranger at the Pentagon?
Oh, you want to jump over to the stranger at the Pentagon?
Okay. Just going with whatever the question come in. I'm not let the viewers.
No worries. I mean, I'm not the person who's the expert on this is Craig Campobasso, but I've worked on the film Stranger at the Pentagon and the script for a major, like a motion picture film, and it's a true story about a guy called Valiant Thor, who was a created being who came to Earth in the 50s and tried to approach the Eisenhower administration with information about how to improve humanity, energy devices, healing devices, and actually was invited to stay at the Pentagon for 3 years in an effort to kind of share this information and bring it into mankind. And of course, he was being held there in a way because the military people wanted to try to figure out a way to use the technology which he had, his ships and the weapons and all the things that they were trying to get their hold of. So Valiant Thor was a Venusian who stayed at the Pentagon for 3 years, and among apparently many other Venusians which are on the surface of the planet right now. In fact, there's supposedly thousands of Venusians because they look very similar to humans. You can't really recognize the difference. They just look like, well, I mean, it would just look like a regular person if you ran into them. They might look a little bit, I mean, how many people do you know that look a little bit different? You're not going to go up to them and say, are you a Venusian, whatever. So they blend in very well, and they've been amongst our society now ever since. Onek is one of them as well.
I would have said that Elon Musk fit that category, because when I look at Elon Musk, he got some kind of look to him that, I'm not disparaging him, I'm just saying, but if there ever was a Venusian right there, I'm thinking he's got to be one, man. All right, let's get some more questions real quick, and then we'll get back to our discussion. Rose says, did Klaus Dona find any evidence that giants or the Nephilim exist? Does he think the giants and the Nephilim are the same beings?
The answer is yes and no. I mean, yes, he has found evidence of giants, but the thing about Klaus you got to realize is Klaus is not somebody who goes out there and makes any claims about what he's discovered, which is why I respect him so much. He doesn't go out and say, oh, these are the bones of the Nephilim, and then create some kind of huge mythology around it. He actually just goes and finds the artifacts and reports on the artifacts as these are giant bones. He doesn't say, these are the giant bones of the Nephilim. He does, of course, look at history and figure out, okay, there's these legends of the Nephilim, and there are legends of the giants in Lemuria. So, this is evidence that these kinds of things may have existed. Are they the bones of the Nephilim? Possibly, but nobody knows. But yes, he's found, many things in South America that he's found, and even, has some of them at his exhibition in Austria. So yeah, absolutely. And, I think that, we now know that the Smithsonian Institute also had in possession bones of giants.
Right.
And it later came out that they actually destroyed them because they were trying to, cover up that part of history. It's a kind of a shameful chapter
Yeah, it's a
of the
shame. Yeah,
Smithsonian's history.
I think there's a lot. I think the serpent mounds and various mounds are probably built and probably were burial places of the giants. Certainly, stuff in the Grand Canyon we discussed earlier. People talk about the Kandahar giant. There may be giants running around even now. But putting on your thinking cap, your conspiracy cap there, Frank. Why do they want to hide Earth history?
Okay, there's where am I going to take that one? Well, for one, you could say that there's always been kind of a group of people that have been richer and more connected and more powerful than the rest of the people, the majority of people. And as technology improved and as discoveries about potentially about extraterrestrials, for example, or about giants or about archaeological finds were made, they ended up in the hands of those people before anybody else, giving those people a particular advantage over the rest of us and a particular knowledge set over the rest of us. And this is something that I guess those in power have always deemed to be something they would like to keep a secret for themselves. And is one of the early, actually one of the main reasons these early secret societies were formed. And the biggest, probably the most powerful secret society of ours in the world today is Majestic. Majestic is being the one that was set up to deal with the recovered crashed discs that began appearing in the United States, starting at no later than the 40s with the Roswell crash and many others, seven other crashes that they actually had that took place. And they realized then that society had kind of reached a certain point of evolution, and if they were to, and they made studies on whether they should disclose the information about the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations to the masses, and they came, one particular is the Brookings, the Brookings Institute, and they came to the conclusion that it was better not to tell that because they were trying to keep and maintain a very regulated system and society out there. And as soon as that they made that decision, you could say that was the beginning of what I call and what Richard Dolan called the breakaway civilization. That means a particular group of humans who are in possession of such information and such knowledge and technology that is so far advanced that it seems like magic to the rest of us who are following the regular school book physics.
All right.
And that the divide between us and this breakaway civilization has in the last 75, 80 years just gotten wider and wider. So there's an obvious reason why they would want to maintain that firewall of information between us and them, because at some point, what are you going to do? Are you just going to come out and tell society what's been going on, that you've been lying to them for the last 80 years? No, they can't. So the lie gets deeper and bigger and bigger. And at the same time, they also know that at some point it's probably going to become inevitable that they have to describe these things. So they use the media, things like films, like Hollywood and television series, to do what's called soft disclosure, which is to kind of train our minds and our consciousness to open ourselves up to the ideas of extraterrestrial civilizations and of super technology and superhuman capabilities and all these things, so that when they one day inevitably break, and you could say we're probably getting close to those times now, then there won't be such a shock in society.
Frank, you think the Navy release of the Tic Tac UFO videos is one of those soft disclosures?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can see it also because it's like they make such a huge deal about it that it's like, wow, just this one little thing. I mean, those who have been interested in researchers in the field know there's far more compelling evidence out there. And alone just the Val Thor story, the Valiant Thor story has never been, I mean, even though it's been recognized as being factual by Project Blue Book members. It's never been openly declared as something that is a part of the official record
Hmm.
of interaction between humans, in this particular case, the American government, and extraterrestrials.
Hmm.
They've never told us that. So the Tic Tac thing is a joke in a way, because it's like, okay, come on, All
Hmm.
right, well, we have to start somewhere, I guess, right?
Right,
But
right, right.
it's interesting because then they made all this fuss about, yeah, they're going to have a big council now. They're going to have a big, there's going to be, they're going to do some research, and they're going to remember that whole thing. They were going to disclose what they found, and
Hmm.
and then they came out and they said, well, we found that there's something out there, but we don't understand what it is. I mean, I just had to laugh.
But by the way, our moderator Jade is a cat lover. I noticed a cat in behind you. What's your cat's
You
name?
noticed him, did you?
He made his debut on the program. What's his name?
He likes to sneak past me somehow in the middle of shows. I don't know what it is.
Okay. What's the cat's name?
Rocco.
Rocco. Okay.
Yeah, Rocco.
Oh, bring him
Right,
over.
you're
Bring him over.
you're on live on. You're in the world right now, Rocco.
Right. Okay. All right. Let's get to another question. From Life Station Express, it says, Frank, what's your coolest discovery? The strangest?
The coolest, strangest discovery. Well, there's been so many. Let me think. Well, one of the ones that I thought was cool, that is pretty remarkable, was this. We did a film called Packing for Mars,
Mhm.
and it started off actually with the moon because I'd been watching some films by another filmmaker called Jose Escamilla about moon rising and about anomalies that were on the moon, which really inspired me to explore this. Like it was like something where I went, wow, that's incredible. Like why don't more of us don't know about this? Like there's structures on the moon and things like that. And then it ended up turning into my doing a film called Packing for Mars. And uh, what we found out is, of course, there's the whistleblowers that came forward and talked about having been involved in programs that took us to the surface of and under the surface of Mars. But what's interesting is you begin to realize that there's an ancient past that has to do with Mars as well, and there's certain monuments on the surface of Mars in certain areas, like the Elysium Quadrant is one of them, where there's some pyramids we talk about in Packing for Mars,
Mhm.
and there's another area called the Sidonia Plateau,
All right.
which has the face of Mars, a five-sided pyramid, and the Journal of Space Exploration put out some papers in the TSI journals, actually, by a couple of guys called Crater and McDaniel, which went into that area, and particularly from the perspective of geographic relativity. They were trying to they were trying to use geometry to prove evidence of intelligent life. And they took those areas in Sedona and a few other areas, and they made very precise measurements, and they found that essentially there's these mounds and there's this pyramid and this face, and if you look at the relativity between these objects mathematically, you can actually they found out that, I mean, it's so well laid out and so precise that
Mhm.
you can actually decipher the geometry, um, to the point of being able to show that the people that had put those things there created formulas which actually depicted the spin of the atom. And that was pretty mind blowing. And then if you look at what we have on the Earth, there's this area called Tiahuanaca, or
Mhm.
sorry, Teotihuacan,
Right.
and that area is called the City of the Gods. And there's pyramids that are laid out in certain configurations there as well. And you ask yourself, well, why are they positioned exactly where they're positioned, and why are they different sizes, and what are those? Do those sizes and those relationships mean anything? And indeed they do. You find out that that whole plaza has been laid out so that if you overlay our solar system on top of it, and you
Mhm.
put our sun at the place where the pyramid of the moon is, and the pyramid and the moon pyramid is actually where the Earth is. You could actually change places between the sun pyramid and the moon pyramid. And there's a third pyramid, what they call the Kukulkan pyramid. That pyramid is smaller in size, and if you look at the height relationship between that pyramid and the pyramid of the Earth, which is the Moon pyramid,
Mhm.
it's actually the same relationship as the diameter of the Earth to Mars.
Coincidence?
And the whole plaza is this whole street that sort of leaves the Kukulkan pyramid and heads toward the pyramid, which I'm now calling the Earth pyramid, which is the Moon pyramid. So it's like the people who built those things, they knew exactly the placement of our planets in our solar system
Mm.
relative to one
Mhm.
another,
Mhm.
built them exactly in those places, and even made the size relationships exactly right. So that one day when we figured this out, we could say that those people who built those monuments
Mhm.
were our ancestors.
Sounds
So
like
our
sounds like they left a.
ancestors seem to have come from Mars at some point in our history and
Mhm.
set those things up. And there's other places on the planet as well. But that's one of the things that I found was really fascinating.
Sounds like sounds like a fingerprint there. Um, okay, let's get to another question here, and this is says this is from Doreen. Says what other future dates did the Guardians of the Looking Glass have?
Well, so far they've only described two dates where things are going to happen. The first one was the 18th of April,
Mhm.
and the next one is the 20th of May.
Are you going to stop it?
Well, I think we already have. I mean, I think
Is
those
that the one
two
you're talking
events,
about?
I would say, since we stopped the 18th,
Hmm.
and we had really literally probably easily a 500,000 people at that point talking about these events, if not more,
Hmm.
because that there's people that talk to other people that aren't necessarily clicking on their simply on clicks alone, you could say 500,000 people knew about it. And events one and two were the ones that were both up there at the same time that I broke the story. So it's safe to say that, essentially I would say event two is would have to have been prevented, I believe, and I'm pretty sure that it has been. Of course, we won't know until after the 20th, but it's one of
Right.
those things that has to do with a scientist, certain scientists. Now, I'm very curious because I never reported the story because I was saying, um, this is absolutely real, and I just found it out there, and it was an anomaly that dropped into my reality, like a reverse needle in
Hmm.
the haystack.
Hmm. Hmm.
It wasn't that it was supposed to be where it was supposed to be when I found it. I didn't find it in a site that had anything to do with Looking Glass. It was on some channel that had, totally non-related topic. And so I feel the universe kind of placed it in my way for me to explore it. So I felt my job was to kind of break it out there and say, "Hey, folks, look at this. This Project Looking Glass is real." The last time we heard about Project Looking Glass was with Carrie Cassidy and Bill Ryan. We're talking about it, 10
Hmm.
years earlier with another person altogether, with another different version of it. So it's out there now, and they're describing events which are cataclysmic. So let's look at this. What is
Hmm.
this, right? So that's all I intended. I had no intention. I didn't realize it was going to explode to the point that it seems like the whole idea of timelines and looking glass and anomalous, technologies like this
Hmm.
has struck a nerve with people.
Hmm.
So at this point, I think it's almost like we've taken the narrative a little bit away from the Guardians of the Looking Glass and put it out, just got this discussion going about
Hmm.
consciousness, which is
Hmm.
actually what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
So I'd rather not focus so much on the actual events. Yes, they're out there
Hmm.
and they're pretty horrendous if you read them. But what's more important is that we realize that we as human beings have the ability with our own consciousness collectively to change the timelines.
Hmm.
But the fact is, for us to change them, we actually need to have a focus. We need to visualize a
Hmm.
timeline of some kind. We can't just say we don't want this timeline to happen. That's not a visualization. It doesn't work that way. The universe only works when you visualize something. And so I wanted to get this, very, very much from the start, wanted to get the conversation locked in tandem with the idea of yes, that there's this looking glass, and yes, there are these timelines out there, and there's agendas, but we can, if we have a chance to change them, let's use this as our opportunities to start a dialogue. And so right now, these two events that they've put on the record have to do with the bombing in New York City, which never took place. the assassination of this Chinese scientist working with quantum technologies and Bitcoin and things like that, which are going to, and CERN, which is going to disrupt, the plans of those who are running the Looking Glass project. But a third one that they've mentioned after we stopped the event on the 18th, they came out with a fourth video and said there's something coming in July that they can't announce yet. So I guess there's going to be an event, but they're just taking it like let's get to the 20th first and see what happens, and then so there's been a lot of discussion on both sides of the whole issue. Like some people think it's a psyop, other people think it's just some gag. But I just think at this point it's almost irrelevant what it is, because we've actually ignited a conversation that is really meaningful, and that's, I think, what is resonating with people the most right now.
Yeah. So Frank, do you think that either we have the ability now, or we'll soon have the ability to transfer our consciousness?
You mean transfer our consciousness into an artificial carrier, or?
Yeah, right.
Okay, you're talking about transhumanism. Yes, I do believe that this is the goal of the transhumanist timeline people. I would say it's the Klaus Schwab gang, the World Economic Forum Agenda 2030. It's interesting because the Looking Glass Guardians described that everything would reach a certain point, and that was 2030, at which point the timeline stopped and start over again, and this device would loop again, and it would play this loop from wherever you were now into 2030 and continually repeat 144 times and then start over again. And 2030 was this important date. They could not see beyond 2030. And it's interesting because 2030 has such a significance out there. And I was actually, one of the things that really motivated me was the fact that the day, or 2 or 3 days earlier, I'd found an article in the Deutsche Wirtschaftsnachricht. This is a sort of a mainstream press paper in Germany, that had just basically had an article on the front page saying the German health minister had just pre-ordered vaccinations for Germans until 2029. So that until December 31st, we're, up until 2030, he's, pretty much set in motion this whole thing. And the vaccinations play a critical role in the timeline manipulation that are being described by the Guardians. And specifically, meaning that the vaccinations are a form of technology allowing those who are in control of the Looking Glass, the deep state, to insert technology into humans so that when something at 2030 is going to take place, kind of a cosmic event, that when it happens, if there had not been Looking Glass people in charge, like deep state people, then the event that happens is a natural event in our cosmos, and it has a direct effect on our consciousness naturally, so that we make kind of an evolutionary leap. And this was something which was very interesting to me, because we'd done a film called Solar Revolution with Dieter Breurs about exactly that topic. Like, there's been this prediction in all of time about, and the ancient indigenous people have even got this in their legends about this moment in time when human consciousness would make another leap altogether, like a quantum leap in our consciousness. And but these transhumanist people, they don't believe in any kind of spiritual perspective. They just think that they're led by Yuval Harari, who's basically a complete atheist, and he very much believes that his version of theology is humans, invented gods, and history will change when humans become gods. So that's where they're shooting, and their idea is to actually take, because they view our brains and our consciousness as being limited to the 3D world. They don't believe in these other extrasensory, other dimensional existences, that we are actually sentient beings that use the 3D matrix world to navigate as souls and learn and experience, interact with each other. They actually think it's the other way around. So they are trying to desperately figure out a way to implant our consciousness into an artificial carrier.
Hmm.
And for them, this event horizon is not this cosmic event that happens, but it's actually this thing that, they call the convergence, where
Hmm.
where humans and machines kind of merge together to become
Hmm.
this new human 2.0 species.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I remember not too long ago, Google said that they expect that technology to be available soon, or they're working on some kind of crap. But if that is a reality, would you sign up for it?
Well, imagine, Daniel, you figured out some way to just take sort of a shadow version of your old memories, not the active creative part of yourself,
Hmm.
and put it inside of a can. And this can has, the ability to move around like a robot, very sophisticated. It can think and tap into the internet and have like super intelligence, but no creative side, just this shell of an existence. And you were stuck inside that can for all of eternity unless somebody shut off the power. I mean, it's kind of a prison in a lot of ways, the way I look at it. It's a very limited, because the machines, no matter how technologically advanced they get, even if they become, what they call self-conscious. In other
Hmm.
words, they can make decisions based on their own volition. You know, that's where I think that's that event horizon that people are predicting, where machines become sentient beings.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, even if that's the case, they're still never going to have that aspect that humans have, and that's that we are not just the flesh. We are creator beings. Like we are mini gods. Like we are gods with a small g, in a sense that we are, you know, souls that are only using 3D reality to experience things, and we can make decisions and create things. We can even create machines. We are the ones that created artificial intelligence. It came from our creativity. The artificial intelligence will always be butting up against that envelope of where we can transcend into fifth and higher dimensions, as described by Burkhard Heim, German physicist, for example, who mapped out a 12-dimensional reality, which contains a field of information just beyond us that calls it G4, which has all of the potential, all of the repository of all the information and knowledge that we as humanity have gathered and exchanged, and we are in constant flux and interchange with that other dimension. That dimension is never going to be attainable by the machines. They're always going to be limited to the envelope of materialism.
Hmm.
And, the transhumanists are diehard materialists.
Hmm.
That's what it's about for them. So there's going to be a two-class society at that point. There's going to be the humans that are the sentient creator beings, and then there's going to be these machines that are very powerful and can think, of course, better than
Hmm.
we can in the material realm, because, we don't always access every single little detail of everything we've ever learned in our lives. We forget those things because we don't necessarily need those things. But we have, in exchange, we have other talents and abilities that machines never have. So yeah, I mean, I believe absolutely they're going to reach that point where they're going to transplant something, whatever
Hmm.
that will be. We don't know how that's, and we've gotten some glimpses of it through, again, Hollywood and through programs like Humans.
Hmm.
And now there's one called Upload, which is like a sitcom about people who are, transfer their consciousness into this artificial virtual reality. Um,
Hmm.
and there may even be a third class of beings that Tom Campbell describes, which are going to be those forms of intelligence which see that the robots created, the artificial intelligence created by mankind is sophisticated enough for them to be able to insert their consciousness into, to navigate, and because it's, worthy of
Hmm.
exploring, but it's never going to be the same kind of consciousness that we are.
Okay, Frank, I listened very intently, and a beautiful discussion we're having. But I'm not sure I heard the answer to the question. Is that a yes or is that a no?
Yes, I do believe they will transfer something into
No,
these
the question
machines.
question it was, would you take it? Would you sign up for it? Basically, for immortality is what we're discussing.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely happy, quite happy being in the body I'm in now, and I have no intention of transplanting what
There,
I am now into some kind of a lesser
there were
physical carrier being, because I know that having gone through other experiences or even produced shows together with people about near-death experience, and psychic abilities, I realized that we are not limited to our physical body, that there's no, in a sense, death is only just a symbol for something which happens, that's transition to other levels or other dimensions.
mhm,
So I'm, quite happy to go explore those dimensions if I, have to leave and transcend my body. But I do believe there's quite a chance that in our lifetime, Daniel, we're going to experience this cosmic event, and that we actually might be amongst those that are here to
mhm,
make a transition and take our consciousness and our being, our identity with us to this new form of humanity.
mhm.
So there, in that case, there won't be necessarily death anymore as we know it now. We actually might transcend death in the natural sense, that we become, higher vibrational beings.
Mhm. It seems like some of the early Star Trek shows episodes address that issue of people transplanting their consciousness into android type beings, and probably I would think there were several Twilight Zone episodes as well. And one of the more recent ones I think was a movie called Replicant where they did that. I mean, there's so many movies of that, but in all those presentations, not one of them turned out good. It became a
Exactly.
dystopian nightmare, and people said, "Man, I should have just died," but now I can't die.
Well, the same thing is happening with the timelines, Daniel, right? I mean, going back to the Guardians of the Looking Glass and the whole Project Looking Glass experiment that was run by Majestic, they found out that essentially the crashed that they've discovered beings that inhabit, like people piloting those craft that they discovered, and it turns out that those beings that they captured, and eventually there were survivors among them,
Mhm.
were not necessarily extraterrestrials in the truest sense, that they were beings from a complete other planet. It turns out that according to the documents that were finally leaked and that came out and were proven to be authentic, that they were humans from the future coming back to this time. And so and there were two particular groups. P45s were one of them, from 45,000 years in the future, and P52s from 52,000 years in the future. And both of those versions of they were our descendants, you could say.
Mhm.
And they were here to manipulate the timelines. And they created a paradox. And so this paradox is something that was discussed among them quite vigorously, and ended up being kind of a document of convergent timeline paradox,
Mhm.
which essentially, when they came back to affect our timeline, they began to affect the future timelines as well. So, they only, it seemed like they only could make things even worse by trying to intervene. However,
Yeah.
one of the extraterrestrials, the extra human to extraterrestrials, the future humans, was talking about consciousness, and how the fact is that yes, this is true. There is this paradox. However, our consciousness has the ability to affect the timeline as well. And
Mhm.
that if we realize that, and we realize that our human consciousness is something which is, standing above all timelines and can actually create and steer timelines, and even stand above physical events that happen, like if there's a cataclysmic event or a magnetic pole shift or something like that, or a
Mhm.
solar flare or a micronova. They're talking about those kinds of events having happened in our history, that we as humans of higher consciousness that come from another dimension, if we make that connection to that other dimension, we are not affected, and we actually change the timeline in our favor.
Mhm.
So yes, there's this paradox, but at the same time, the paradox includes the potential that we create a timeline which is unaffected by all these events.
Mhm. I know, filthy rich people put their brains in cryostasis, waiting for a future where they'd be able to be reinserted in a body somewhere. And then, of course, like I mentioned about Google, and then of course we talk about transhumanism. It's man's quest for immortality, which goes back to the dawn of mankind. But hey, I got good news. Well, they're trying to end death. I think I think in the Bible it says the last thing that will be destroyed, God will destroy death. So there will be a time when death is destroyed, and we won't have to have our brains sitting around in some kind of robot somewhere doing all kind of crazy stuff. All right, let's get some more questions for you. It says, Frank, is 2030 when Nibiru comes through? Are you familiar with Nibiru?
Again, please. The when what comes through?
Is 2030 when Nibiru comes through. I think that is a,
Nibiru.
yeah,
Okay,
Nibiru is a
Nibiru. Okay, the
planet.
planet Nibiru you're
Hmm.
talking about.
Yeah.
This could be related. We had a whistleblower on our on our film Packing for Mars called Lucas Gantamburlo, who was bringing out information that had been confided to him by a Vatican whistleblower, a Jesuit, who had talked about the secret space program run by the Vatican, which had found out that in the 80s already they had sent probes and they'd found that there was this sort of twin binary to our sun, a huge body that has a cycle that's thousands of years, which has had an impact on society. And they determined that this actual body, this planetary body, is out there and does come into our solar system very close. The perihelion has made its appearance several times or many times already, and they were projecting they actually had mathematical calculations for it, and their calculations put it at being into coming close to Saturn around
Hmm.
2029 and eventually being very at its perihelion, its closest place to Earth in 2032. So
Hmm.
I thought that was very interesting because here's that 2030-ish date again.
Right.
I mean,
There it
I
is.
always find it interesting when you can find multiple sync points on the data.
Hmm.
So, it just adds validity to this information that's out there, that there really is something around 2030. So this cosmic event that's being described, there's also a guy called Charles Hapgood talking about, the Earth cataclysmic theory,
Hmm.
that there's been massive, like, Velikovsky talked about that. The planets weren't always in the same position as they are now, for example.
Hmm.
And the position that they are now, there's already been several cataclysmic events which has reset society and thrown us back to, the Stone Age, literally. And you can find this on cave drawings and legends about how the Earth stood still for 3 days, or it was total darkness, or the sun never left for 3 days, depending
Hmm.
on what side of the planet you were on,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So hinting at these kinds of events taking place in a cyclical fashion. So the cosmic event that's taking place, that's standing before us, and this is also something that the P-52s and P-45s talked about. They were back in time now, just before the big event, right? So there
Hmm.
is something coming, and it is just around the corner. And I do believe we're probably going to experience it in the next, 10 to 50 years, let's say.
Hmm.
Um, so, yeah, this Nibiru could very well have something to do with it. Could Nibiru trigger a solar flare, a mega flare that comes to our planet and doses us with this energy frequency?
Hmm.
Certainly, why not? I mean, it makes total sense. And if you look at it in terms of how a large body could play havoc to the current order in our solar system, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I think it could be very related. I can't prove it, but it does seem like, a conceivable scenario, especially in terms of other science if you put it up against it.
Okay. All right. This is from Teflon Co. It says, Frank, have you researched the Merkaba and have you ever flown in one?
All I really can say about the Merkaba is, there's like the version that Drunvalo Melchizedek talks about. It's being kind of like a force field around our bodies
Hmm.
that is connected through it's being a sort of a geometric, a shape of sacred geometry. It ties us in energetically to the cosmos around us, to our immediate environment. But there's also the Merkaba that's talked about in the Stranger at the Pentagon material, that it's actually a form of and Desiree Hertog talked about it with us as well. Like, it's a form of transportation, that you can actually put yourself inside of a Merkaba, and the Merkaba is used to transport, to teleport for those people who don't need spaceships, because there essentially are extraterrestrial beings or higher beings that do not require ships or
Mhm.
saucers or motherships or anything to travel. They can actually step inside of a Merkaba and beam themselves or teleport immediately to any place that they want to. So there's that form of it as well. That's pretty much what I know about the Merkaba.
Mhm. Do you consider yourself, have you experienced going in or in and out of another dimension? Do you always feel that you're grounded in this reality, or do you feel sometimes just intrinsically, a feeling or something that you're maybe living a different life than you was yesterday, or any kind of thing like that, or are you still in kind of like a research mode and you may have experienced it, but you haven't been able to quantify it yet?
Well, I'm quite satisfied with the idea of being here and not in any other dimension, in the
Mhm.
sense that I've noticed that I've been able to prove to myself that if I visualize something, for example, if I see myself in some scenario doing something, anything could be like either playing tennis or an instrument, or or I used to be in, much more athletic and do track and field, and I could
Mhm.
see myself sprinting, to the finish line in the
Okay.
first place, or to be like, to have this, form, like to just have this perfect physical form as I'm, whatever I'm doing it, and I would do it, and I would actually achieve it. I actually then could play the instrument, or I would, be able to play that sport
Mhm.
or do that thing. So I realized how powerful visualization is. And along with that came that if I was listening, like I sometimes get messages, like just these voices or these sentences or these ideas in my brain.
Mhm.
And at one point, I started to react to them or act on them. And I realized that, hey, like, I'm actually getting a telepathic message here, because then it would be some person I would think of a person.
Mhm.
And then, within a few minutes, they would either get in touch with me, or, some message would come through on email. And then I began to realize, okay, wait a minute, we're far more, like, we're already connected to this other dimension,
Mhm.
we just forgotten. So the more you tune in those things and look at them as actual abilities rather than strange anomalies, like, oh, that's strange that that person, I was just thinking of him, and look
Mhm.
at it as, hey, this is another proof that I'm actually a telepathic being,
Mhm.
then you realize you're already living in that other
Mhm.
dimension.
You know,
We're just not aware of it, So in that sense, that's, I guess, the closest I could describe as myself being in
mhm.
that other dimension. I've never had any beings like show up on my lawn in a spaceship, get out and say, we're from planet Arcturus or something like that. I mean, that's never happened. I've seen UFOs. Um, and I also think that there was a bit of a communication there, because they appeared when surprisingly at that single moment when I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if, like, right now, and then there they were, right? So, but they didn't land and get out of their craft or anything, or so I mean, that's the extent to which I could say I've
Mhm.
explored those other dimensions.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to throw that to the people watching the show in the live chat, because what you describing about thinking of somebody and them calling, that seems like it's a common trait for human beings. So people watching the program in the live chat, either YouTube or on the channel, if you ever thought about somebody and then all of a sudden the phone rang or they knocked on your door, that person, just say yes or no, like it's never happened to you, or yes, it has happened to you. I know it certainly has happened to me. And let's get to another question over here. I've got a few more questions. I'm getting toward the end of the broadcast. It says, uh, there's an interesting theory about CERN, time travel, Donald Trump, Nikola Tesla, and John Titor. It all ties to QAnon and who is Barron Trump. I think that's a. I've seen that thing. There's I think it's a book with. It looks like it's Barron Trump. Could
Yes,
he be from the future? Or are they using Stargates?
you know, there's a lot of mysterious circumstances around that whole situation, I have to say. And wasn't it was Trump's uncle who was the one who was in charge of archiving and researching the works of Nikola Tesla that were recovered after his death. and basically they took possession of that information.
Hmm.
And Nikola Tesla was working on time travel and teleportation technologies. And it does seem rather strange that, the whole Barron Trump thing. I mean, yeah, it's true. It's like it's, there's some strange anomalies there. So that you have to
Hmm.
wonder if Trump isn't part of, some kind of a group that is actually working inside of that project
Hmm.
and manipulating things
Hmm.
and that know things about what's coming, or and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're good or bad. I think we have to maintain a neutral position here. We don't know. The jury's out on it, because you hear a lot about Trump's going to save America or make America great again and all these
Hmm.
things, and could drain the swamp. And there's all these thousands of sealed indictments, and the whole QAnon thing to me actually was more, for me, the QAnon thing was also kind of a psyop, was like an artificial intelligence that had been put in there. And it actually behaved a lot like artificial intelligence
Hmm.
because it drew on certain events, including Looking Glass, and put them out there. But there were some things that were wrong. I mean, there were things that QAnon put out there that I for myself was able to verify as being incorrect. So I realized, okay, it isn't someone that is all knowing.
Hmm.
It isn't one person that has the absolute truth. And AI is something that you can see when they. I also believe AI was deployed when the whole COVID narrative began to take shape.
Hmm.
And that's what it would explain why so many hundreds of countries were on the same page instantaneously with
Instantaneously.
respect to the line
Yeah.
that they were bringing out of what it was.
Right. Right. Right.
They were being fed a script that was created with the assistance of
Mhm.
artificial technology,
Yeah, and I would say,
artificial intelligence. And
I,
you can always see that because there were anomalies that took place where certain people and certain and pictures that were appearing on the news as being from the hospital in Elmhurst or New York, and then you found out later that those pictures were actually from a film, from an Italian film in the 80s.
hmm,
And so this is for me the telltale sign that was of artificial intelligence, grabbing data that's in the system, that's on the internet, in the network that has access to everything that's in the physical network, and making the mistake between, is this real or is this fiction? Learning still to navigate the boundaries between fiction and reality, and putting those things into the narrative. And then they were later, then, oh, hey, wait a minute, there's some dummies in the picture. That's actually a picture of a simulation experiment that took place several years earlier. That's actually not a current picture of this hospital that they're
yeah,
describing on the news
they do
story.
make those mistakes from time to time. And
Exactly.
by
So the whole thing with Barron Trump, and this is another one of those strange things, yeah, that is an anomalous thing that proves to me that Looking Glass technology has been deployed by the intelligence community, and it makes its appearance in those forms, like even The Simpsons. Yeah, that's
right,
another one of those cool
it is.
anomalous things
How many
that you
times have
see
they
out
been
there. How
right?
could they know that about the Trade Center, and
Right.
how
Or
would they know
Trump
that
and the
about the
escalator.
truckers, in
Yeah.
2020 and all
And
2022, right?
Trump and the escalator. I mean, it's kind of freaky.
Yes.
By the way, people did respond to the question, have they thought of somebody? And then they called. And we've got Jim Tedesco said yes, Max said yes, Rose said yes, Robert yes, Autumn said yes, Freely Speaking said yes, lots of times, put Yahweh first, yes. So a whole lot of people have had that experience. It just seems like those are experiences that we can maybe build upon or sort of exercise to get more, I don't want to say results from them, but just be aware. Yeah, I think if you're just aware of those kinds of abilities, they maybe, I don't know if it change your life, but it certainly be a positive step toward a greater understanding of the real world that's around you. Because I think we live in some sort of simulation anyway. All right, a few more questions, and we'll get out of here. It says, uh, do you believe the entire Earth and its people have been put in another timeline?
Well, the fact is, we are all on running on parallel timelines anyway. And, alone the Chani experiment I described earlier, Duncan Rhodes, who gave me that from Australia, that whole thing, was a perfect example of how there are actually parallel Earths which have been communicating with our Earth. So yeah, we are in a sense, already existing on multiple timelines in multiple universes at this very moment. It's only the focus of our consciousness which determines which one we're on. And I believe that the timeline that we're trying to kick into reality, which is the one the Guardians were warning us about. They were telling us, there's this timeline that's being set in motion by the transhumanist dark state, the negative one, but there's this other timeline which has to do with our natural quantum leap evolution. And so that timeline is the one that I believe we need to kick into reality, into motion by believing, by visualizing it and seeing it out there and feeling it. And like what you just mentioned about how, these telepathic messages, this we hear someone and then they call us. The more we start to practice and start thinking of those things as strange coincidences and then shutting them off again and putting our focus back on the 3D world, and the more we start opening up and saying, wait a minute, I wonder how many other messages I'm getting
Hmm.
out there, which are, examples of my higher, of a higher level of my consciousness. The more we actually begin experiencing them, and the more we can affirm and realize that, hey, wait a minute, there's more to me than I actually thought.
Hmm.
The more probable this new timeline that we want to teleport to or be on will actually manifest. That's the only way I can explain it. I can't really imagine, some kind of, beings coming here and just beaming us over to a new timeline, because A, that would interfere with our free will. We have to realize that we have the ability to free will ourselves into doom as well. Because how can you have free will and then still say that there's going to be an intervention where some beings are going to come and then they're going to, maybe there's going to be an intervention where some of us are going to be picked up. And I think there are examples of that. I've had people contact me and say, yeah, they definitely, this has happened in South America, for example, when there was volcanoes and earthquakes that, should have wiped out a bunch of people, and they were literally lifted off and then put back again. I think there's going to be limited, um, evacuations, if we call them that. But I don't really believe that there's going to be a mass intervention where
Hmm.
we are going to be taken from Earth and put on another Earth, because that would interfere with our free will to decide we have to do it on our own.
Hmm.
The only way out of this is that we actually wake up. This is a wake up call to us. The Guardians of the Galaxy were a wake up call for me, for us to go, wait a minute, we have to start focusing on this other timeline, this organic quantum leap consciousness timeline.
Hmm.
Because if we don't do it, we're just giving energy to the other side, who are they're very clear about where they want to go in their timeline. They
Hmm.
have these meetings, the
Hmm.
World Economic Forum has regular meetings. They have regular presentations, where Leonardo DiCaprio and Biden are all sitting in the front row, pretty much praying to Yuval Harari about the
Oh.
new digital age and the transcendence and all that stuff. I mean, they're serious about where they want to go, and they're in charge of the media.
Hmm.
They're the ones that are producing the television programs, which are programming us to believe in their version of reality. So that's where I think we need to be, more than to think that we're going to be teleported into another
Hmm.
dimension. It doesn't
Hmm.
really, it doesn't satisfy our free will's desire to make that leap voluntarily.
Hmm.
There would be nothing. How would we learn anything if we were just taken off of this timeline and thrown on another timeline? We would just
Hmm.
carry on with the baggage that we brought with us.
Hmm.
So,
It's interesting.
maybe we can stop it a few years or change it in that sense, but it's not going to be that quantum leap.
It's interesting what you're describing there is actually a scenario that's in the Bible. I think that talks about something called a rapture, and where people are taken off the planet. But and I would say that the people that agree with that accept that. You talk about is that violate somebody's free will? I think the people that believe that as it is written that there will be this taking away of some group of people. I think they want to go. I don't think they're going to be going against their will. I think it'd be people that are left behind. Are going to
Yes,
say,
I
"Wait a
believe
minute."
there's going to be some people that are going to be open to being taken, and they were ready. Maybe they are. Maybe they were brought here in the first place. Maybe they're like those Venusians that are among us. There could be many extraterrestrials walking among us. Maybe we're not all human. But absolutely, I think that has to do with there's going to be on the one hand, a cosmically induced consciousness stimulating frequency, if you may, something like that, that's going to happen, which is going to elevate our consciousness, which is a form of the rapture, you could say. I mean, I think the stuff's all encoded in the Bible as well. I mean, the Bible, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible, and it doesn't, it's almost like the main element here that, and I think you can find it in the Bible plenty, is that we have to become righteous citizens. We have to be honest. We have to have integrity. We have to be love-centered. We
Mhm.
shouldn't be manipulating people negatively. We shouldn't be lying to people.
Yeah.
These are things that are clear and they're laid out, and so you don't even need a holy scripture to make sense of that. It just is true. As soon as we stop lying to ourselves and as soon as we call out all the frauds and fake stuff around us and we embrace honesty and integrity and all these good things, heart-centered existence, we will change our reality. And this is a very, very simple natural law. It can only be that way, that we can only reach higher consciousness if we embrace higher vibrational ideas. And those happen to be, you know, high morality is a higher vibration. It's a higher form of consciousness. There's just not enough of us practicing it. Or let's just say, we are our morality is being blemished by us being forced to play the game of those people that have dark agendas all around us. Many people were forced to have been vaccinated. They didn't really want to be vaccinated, but they had to because they were living in this world. And if they were gonna, they had a job or, they were just pressured, and this is how they work, the
Mhm.
other side. And that's how you can tell that, there really is an other side, because those other side people have solutions that they could give us right now, solutions for free energy, that would take us off the need for carbon burning, as they call it, the great sin, right? They would take us away from that. They have healing modalities which have been invented over 100 years ago that would cure
Mhm.
any form of disease out there. And why aren't they bringing it out to us? Well, that's the evidence to you that there is an agenda to keep that from us. And there are certain people who are in
Mhm.
charge of that. And the
Mhm.
rest of us are trying to force it out. And the only way we can do that, I think, is to really put ourselves into the mindset of creating this other new earth, as you might want to call it, this higher vibrational, higher quality, higher consciousness earth. But we
Mhm.
have to visualize it. We have to see ourselves in there. We have to imagine what it might be like. Like what kind of technology might you have there? What do you see? Is it going to be, electric cars, but without a Tesla lithium battery, just one that sucks energy out of the environment and
Mhm.
it's totally clean? Do you see yourself, walking down the street, and when you see your neighbor, you all give yourselves a hug because you're all connected, Like you have to start seeing these kinds of pictures. You have to visualize this kind of beautiful world that we actually have coming. If we don't do it, how are we supposed to anchor it into this dimension?
Mm. And somebody said they pray for change. They said, "Let that change begin in me," and that's how it goes. Frankie, you're doing it. I'm doing it. People watching the programs doing it, trying to do it. That's why we try to bring all the guests that we can with all different backgrounds, all different belief systems, and try to get everybody together because we're going to have to solve this thing. And this thing about coercion, talk about the shot. It's just coercion. Where coercion is and force, you know that that's coming from a wrong side. It's coming from a dark place. No matter what, if you have to trick somebody, force them, coerce them, and lie to them. And how many times
Exactly.
have we all been lied to? We've been lied to our whole life, and so we've been lied to about history and just so many things. So we have to kind of struggle to find the truth, but there are answers that come, and at least partial answers, which is better than none. And a continual seeking of these answers will make a person wiser and more considerate of others, which is, like you said, these sort of standards, unmovable truths of being honest and being nice and not judgmental, so to speak, for the good in the good ways and those kinds of things. Man, they're what you call them high vibrations. I call it being a better spiritual person. Just being a good person. But when if that's not in your consciousness, if it's not in the forefront of your thinking, you're not going to get anywhere. It's just going to be a dark place for you too as well. Well, Frank, listen, we've got at the end of the broadcast here. Loved having you on. Any final things you want to say about what you're doing or your website or anything like that? You go right ahead.
Sure. I mean, it would be great if like if you need to get in touch with me, you'd like to get in touch with me, you can go to my website, frankjacob.com. For people who are interested in kind of a deep dive into the looking glass technology and the history of that, I'm creating a webinar right now, which I'm probably going to be putting out in the next couple of weeks. So if you're interested in being part of that webinar, then I'm still building the landing page and all that. It's going to take a few more days. So unfortunately, I got caught with my pants down when this whole thing exploded. But you can go to my website and there's a contact form and just drop me a note and say, yeah, webinar, I want to do the webinar or whatever. And then I'll get in touch with you when I'm ready in the next few days. And we're working on a film called the E.T. Almanac, a book about the E.T. Almanac book that was put out with Craig Campobasso and MUFON. So the filmic version of that is going to be coming out this year, well, hopefully this year. We're trying to get it done. We're pushing, and that's something we're working on. And other than that, yeah, just you can go to screenaddiction.com if you would like to see the films that we've been talking about, like Klaus Dona Chronicles or Packing for Mars, The Solar Revolution. On that page, you can scroll down to the bottom, and there's a series of buttons where you can access, not only DVDs if you want a DVD, but you can actually stream them on the internet or download them from the internet as well.
All right. Well, Frank, I see a lot of great comments in the chat regarding you and your presentation and our conversation tonight. Really, people appreciate it. And any of those, like Klaus Dona or anybody that you've done videos, if you're ever talking to them, if anyone's still alive, whoever, how that goes. But if they ever want to come on the show, just say, hey, man, contact Daniel Lott and we'll have him on the show.
Yeah, I'll absolutely do that. Yeah, exactly. I will absolutely do that.
Okay. Well, hey, you stay safe in Germany, Frank. I appreciate you so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me, Daniel. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah. Take care. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.